Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
At Evernorth Health Services, we believe costs shouldn't get in the way of life-changing care, and we're doing everything in our power to make it possible. Behavioral health solutions that also keep your projections at their best? It's possible. Pharmacy benefits that benefit your bottom line? It's possible. Complex specialty care that cares about your ROI? It's possible. Because we're already doing it. All while saving businesses billions. That's Wonder made possible. Learn more at evernorth.com/wonder.
What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act podcast, leveling up your life's journey. Welcome back to the Second Act with Michael and John. How you doing today, John?
Michael, man, I'm excited. I'm excited for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of change happening.
Yep.
Here on the show, there's a lot of change happening just in our universe, in our collective universe, and the conversations that we're having. And I think today's going to be a lot of that, a peek behind the curtain to see some of that change. But I'm really excited today for a lot of reasons. I'm invoking some change in my life from my workout program and the way I'm eating and the intentionality and time I'm having with my family. So we always talk about the 1% change. And I just love to see that it's happening in our own lives as well and with our guests. And I can't be more excited about it. How about you?
No, I couldn't agree more. I love what the Second Act has evolved into. Our mission began with the intent of sharing our stories, then evolved into a way for others to share their stories. And the stories range from like secular, mindful views of the world to those who are on a faith-based crusade. They're some very extreme in certain ways, but they all are seeking to bring hope and positive vibes and inspiring motivation to the world. And one of the things we launched, John, that we're super proud of, I hope it takes off. You never know. But the journey's going to continue with our MJ Pay It Forward campaign that we've kicked off this month. And I've always loved, and you and Jeremy, our producer, and I have all talked about the idea of paying for a random person's coffee or buying a random person's groceries or picking up a random person's tab.
Yeah.
And so in the spirit of this, we launched this giveaway program that makes it virtually anyone eligible. You go to whatisyoursecond.act.com, enter a couple of details, and you're entered to win a gift card, no strings attached. We'll announce a winner each week.
Very cool.
And the amounts will vary. But it's just a small sort of way for us to help.
Yep.
And there's more big announcements coming, so we hope our audience stays tuned. But super excited about today's guest as well.
Yeah, man, that's cool. I love the thought of paying it forward, paying it back, because as I've talked about in my journey in my life, I've had a lot of people who've been influential by doing the same to me, just in time, in instruction, in patience. And if we can do that to some of our listeners and brighten their day, man, it just puts a smile on our face.
It does.
And it can change somebody's day. Even a free cup of coffee can just put a smile on their face and let them go their way. And that hopefully will have ripples down the road. So,
yeah.
But I did say that I was excited about today, and I'll tell you why. Today we have on a super good dude, Ben Nelson, who is my friend and soon to be everyone else's who's listening. Ben is a partner at Wild Oak Capital, a real estate investment firm focused on multifamily apartments and new single-family development syndications based in Durango, Colorado.
Another Coloradan, love it.
I met Ben probably 2 years ago through my series of connections, some guys I've talked about on here before, Stu, Grazier, David Gutierrez. They introduced me to Ben Nelson. And man, from the day I met him and got to hug him and shake his hand, he's been a blessing in my life on many, many facets. But we can get into the show. But more about Ben. He grew up in southwestern Colorado, has over 15 years of large-scale project management experience, including multiple world record credits, and routinely manages large projects with multi-million-dollar budgets. Working with both nationally and internationally individuals, Ben specializes in building relationships with stakeholders, government entities, municipalities, authorities, and institutions to reach common goals and create uncommon results.
I like it.
Outside of work,
those
Ben
are the
loves...
bios that other people write for you, right? Like that. Like, I was just saying, great. Like, yeah, like all of the words came from somebody else.
We use GPT.
Yeah.
Outside of work, Ben loves spending time with his family, enjoying all the great outdoor activities Colorado has to offer, and he's a super friend and super connector. So, man,
nice.
Welcome to the show, Ben. We're glad to have you on.
Welcome.
Really, really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah.
I think you're a fellow buff, too. I see you.
Yes, the highs and lows of CU.
Nice. Yeah, there are highs and lows for sure.
Yes. That's the Rockies. We're good at that in Colorado.
Yeah.
Broncos, Rockies, the Buffs. We're good at that.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
So just for our audience, we talked about this before we got on the show. Just for our audience, we here at the second act, we love, as we just said a minute ago, to do the 1% changes. We are changing the format of the show. We're mixing it up a little bit, and we're just going to dig in to our guests for the next, I don't know, couple episodes until it flops. And we're just going to dig in. Not really an agenda, but we want to know more about who our guests are in more of a unique way instead of going chronologically down the road. So I think it will uncover some greater conversation, some deeper conversation that's really not scripted. And Ben, you're our first
Let's
subject.
Do it. Right on.
Yeah. So Ben, you and I met, like I said, 2 years ago. We met through some mutual connections on the real estate front.
Okay.
Real estate wasn't your first go. It wasn't my first go. I was coming out of the military. You were coming out of, if I can remember, extreme sports, right?
Yeah, action sports production for the most part. I mean, I spent a large amount of my career producing events, right? So that's what I got at. I fell into it more than anything else. I was in school for 3 out of the 4 years to be some type of doctor, wanted to help athletes, like coming from athletic background, and realized at a certain point, it's like, this is not my path. This is not where I want to go. I was enjoying it because I thought it was really cool, right? But I would have been a terrible doctor. It's kind of what my realization, like sitting in anatomy.
Yeah.
So I just kind of spent some time. Like I was a ski bum in Squaw Valley for a little bit and realized I had to get out of there. Like if I don't leave right now, like I'm never going to leave kind of feeling, Ended up in Spain for a little while, and through that produced some events, like just on a small scale. Like was doing it in college a little bit too. And so I just moved everything I had to New York City, which at the time was like, a duffel bag and a trash bag full of belongings, and just started at the bottom, producing of all things fashion shows. I want to get into a space where it's like, if I can do this as a career, I want to put myself in a space that's like the farthest thing that I know. Like we could produce skiing events because I skied my whole life, right? Like I knew that.
Okay.
I didn't have to try. So through that, met some incredible people, worked really hard. We were able to produce some stuff at a pretty high level, but I also realized like this is also not my space, right? Like I put myself there knowing that it probably wouldn't be, but it gave me an opportunity to learn a lot of things from some very, very talented and very efficient individuals. But worked my way back into action sports because truly that was more of a passion of mine than anything else, and met a bunch of guys in Red Bull in New York who were looking to do some pretty awesome things, and I got a shot at a pretty young age to produce some things. So we got to do some fun world record opportunities early on. Like we're jumping BMX bikes in Central Park and breaking quarter pipe world records in Maine. And and that just kind of led us into a space where myself and some other folks I was working with just got known for being able to do some we got to do some really difficult things. We got approached with some ideas like, hey, we want to race off-road desert-based short course trucks, but like on the snow and in Maine. Like, can we do that? We're like, yeah, I mean, anything's possible with time and money. Let's go do it.
Anything is possible. Wow.
So yeah, so we got to do some of that stuff, and we ended up pulling that off. There was a 3-year run, but a lot of things like that, right? Like just, and it was incredible. And from that, met some people, got into racing more than anything else. And so we raced motorcycles. We raced, I mean, basically if it had a motor, we raced it, like planes, cars, whatever, and produced the races. And it kind of came to a point where, I was gone when I was with my wife initially, like we would always travel at the same time, right? Like worked out, we're gone at the same time, we're back at the same time. And then we had our first kid, and then you kind of get to play man defense, right? Like you get to hand it off, right? Like one person gets to go, the other person stays. Second kid came around, and it became a little bit more difficult, obviously, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'll give it to my wife. Like she never pushed it. It was always difficult. It strained our relationship more than once. She's a professional as well, dramatically smarter than I am, like vastly better than I am as a human, but still held everything together while I was gone for 10, 20, 30, 40 days at a time.
Wow.
Chasing what I'd loved, and what we became really good at, frankly. But it became time, like the last race that we produced, we're racing cars around Red Hook, Brooklyn, just across the river from Manhattan. And it was same thing. It was a big lift, and it took a lot, and it took a lot of people, but the volume of energy that it takes to do that, and then to come home, and then switch back to being a dad. And I realized, not for the first time, but probably hopefully for the last time, like that my life was moving on without me. Like I would come home, and I was a stranger in my house for the most part.
Yeah.
Like they had routines and they had everything else. And I had to get back into it and reintroduce myself to my life, what I consider my life. So I made that commitment. And so to kind of bring it in, my brother Eric, who is also an incredibly smart and talented and amazing individual, we'd talk to each other quite a bit, and he picked up some single families. He's like, hey, he's done some real estate, and he and I kind of started having some conversations before I quit producing, and we bought a couple like little, fourplexes in Lubbock. And he was truly the one who's like, hey, I think we can make a run at this. Because he was an engineer at the time, and he didn't really love what he was doing. He had a partnership that was starting to he could see it starting to move apart. And so we decided, that it'd be a good fit. Like that we work well together. We're really honest with each other. We're very fortunate to have that relationship with each other as brothers. And along with 2 other really, really smart individuals, created Wild Oak Capital. And from there, we have gone into syndication. We dipped our toes at a few things. And I am incredibly fortunate to have team members that can do things. Like one of our team members, Shane, can underwrite things in his sleep that I can't do on a calculator. Like there's just, there's a support system there that is great. So nice. We're still evolving. We're still evolving what we do and how we do it. We're fortunate that we're now just right at 1,000 doors and 100 million under management. Those are all numbers. There's like anybody can make them up with. Like for us, that's been one of those like a milestone for us to say like, okay, what do we really want to do at this point? And like, how are we getting better? We've learned a bunch of lessons along the way. So I'm happy to dig into any of that, but that's sort of a long drawn out way of getting you to where I am, at least today.
There's so much to unpack with all that you just dropped on us here.
Yeah.
But I just sort of going back to one of the, I think, really important things is reconciling that drive to achieve that maybe we have, all the way back to our early childhood days to, once you become a family man, balancing that with being present with your family. And it's tough. I don't know if anyone's mastered it.
Right. If you have, please tell me.
Yeah, please share the information.
You'll be our next guest.
But I'll tell you, Ben, like the Red Bull stuff, I always find it so interesting because it's so extreme. I love how extreme Red Bull gets. And my wife and I were talking recently about why my interest or curiosity tends to peak with extreme things. Just because, and we had this like really long, deep conversation about this, and we sort of narrowed in on the fact that I'm fascinated with people who have this incredible amount of focus on something.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they have these like blinders on, and they will not stop until they get to that goal at the expense of almost anything. And sort of bringing that back to what we were just talking about, reconciling family life and being present and doing these big, ambitious things. As you evolve as a human, I think you become more self-aware, and then you have to make a conscious decision about what you want to do. But nevertheless, thank you for producing those amazing things, because I love them.
Yeah.
And they're awesome. One of my favorite Red Bull productions was when the guy jumped from like 120,000 feet and like went down to earth, and it was like the biggest parachute or highest parachute jump ever. If you haven't watched it, check it out.
It's Red Bull Stratos. His name's Felix Baumgartner. We were on the ground for that one. So
No way.
That's cool.
That counts. We cheated on that one. We got a couple of world records on that one. We had to bump it up.
It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the thing is, it's almost like everything else, though. It takes so many people to do that.
Yeah.
And I think, getting into this, especially to the second act, and if you wouldn't mind, I had a conversation recently with Eric on our podcast about this, and what you're getting at is, I think, for me, and I can't speak for a lot of people, but for what I've found through conversation with people that have sort of experienced a similar thing, where you come to a realization that, it's not easy if you hate what you're doing. But for me, it was almost harder because I loved it so much. And not to say that I'll it's complete, like I quit that and now I'm this thing.
Right.
That continuation was something that I had to kind of come to terms with, that I'm not just that and I'm not just this, that like I can be both. Like I still produce, like we still produce Scale as an event. I still help on some other events. There's some things, but just the way and the timing in which we do those things has changed. And necessarily, I sleep in my own bed a lot more than I used to. But there's a thing about imposter syndrome where like, for me getting into real estate and all of a sudden you're raising capital and like you have to be a real estate guy. You have to do those things. And it was a difficult transition. And I didn't really understand why, or maybe I should phrase it in the sense that like I wasn't honest with myself enough in the beginning, because I don't speak just for producing, right? So we'd built a life around gathering people for so long, and then COVID hit and everything that we had built got taken from us. Like we can no longer gather people. And so there's a lot of scrambling through that. And producing is a tough space anyway, right? Like being gone from your family. And once you get to a certain level, it's not for everybody. It's almost for nobody. And I think that's kind of like at any elite level, that's kind of how it is, right? Like you pay a price in some way to get to that level. And for me to be able to step away almost created this feeling of like, oh yeah, there's just another one that can't hack it, right? Like there's another one who can't make it, like tossed in the towel, like that's cool, but like the rest of us that are still capable of being here are still going to be here. And to reconcile that with like the choice that I was making on purpose and the weight and the gravity of that was really hard it was really difficult to manage, right? And Eric said one thing to me, he's like, when you talk to somebody about who you are or what you do, does that change based on who you're talking to, right? Like does the definition of how you're employed or who you even are, does that adjust based on the context of the listener? And the answer is yes, right? Like that's a pretty tough thing to look at in the face. But it comes down to the fact, and I think he learned this from another coach, was like, you can be all of these things. You say, I make my money in many ways from production and from real estate. In Eric's case, like I'm an engineer and I'm a coach and I'm a real estate investor, right? Yeah. Like there's a lot of those ways. And as soon as I came to terms, like, I don't owe anything to anybody. Like, I'm sorry to cuss, but like, I don't owe shit to anybody. Like I'm proud of what I did. I stand on what we accomplished. It's a very much a big part of who I am and who I am today. But like, this is my next thing, right? Like it's a step up for me, it's a step ahead. And as soon as I really started pushing into that space and having conversations with people that were where I came from, whether they've moved on or whether they're still there, without fail, everybody's been like, right on, man. Good for you. That sounds awesome. Like, let me know how I can help. Yeah. And I think our own worst critic is for me anyway, my own worst critic is myself. Yep. The biggest lift was to get out of my own way. Yeah. And as soon as I start doing that, it's like, right on, game on. Like I still produce a little bit. I still have phone calls. We still call people up, some more investors or people from the space in the past. And all of a sudden I realize I have an ability to help people. Like if I'd have met me being able to help me like actually put money away and invest like while I was on the road and focus, like I'd be 4 steps farther along than I am right now. So like now my mission has changed. Like I get to genuinely have those conversations. Like, dude, I know where you're at. I know like viscerally what you're going through. Yeah. Let me help you out a little bit.
I love that.
I think, Ben, you talked about something that affects a lot of military individuals who have made it to far extremes in their career, whether it's a position or a responsibility or a unit that they've made it to. they're so wrapped up, and I'm guilty of this as well. I'm so wrapped up in their identity and answering that question, who are you? And they don't really tell who they are or who John Ballenger is. It's what they do.
Yep.
Right? We find our identity in what we do. And then there comes a point where what we do is no longer who we are or no longer good enough. You know, we don't match up for some reason, whether it's kids or getting married or, you know, or a pandemic, right? And we have to face that question of who am I? I'm not actually this helicopter pilot because I don't fly helicopters anymore. But who am I? And that is very crippling to so many people, especially when you've made it big and in your industry, and you know. And with Michael being in tech and me in the military, there comes a point where other things start growing and we have to shift. And that shift is either on our own terms or it's not. But either way, we have to be comfortable with the next thing. And so I applaud you for having those deep conversations with your family and your brother and recognizing and yourself. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it leads me to a question, you know, when you're talking earlier on about going from Colorado to New York and fashion shows to extreme sports, is there this question in the back of your mind the whole time you're going through those changes? Like what's next? Or what do I really want to become? Or were you comfortable in those places, truly comfortable to think, well, this may be it. I'm happy right here.
I mean, I've asked this question to myself a lot, to be honest with you, because I think for whatever reason, I've just kind of found myself in some places. I've been very fortunate to be around people that have helped kind of not design, but like when I made a choice to move to New York, or even to space, it's like, I'm going. Like, I'm just going to go. And I'm going to trust sort of a feeling that I had, right? Okay. I was lucky enough to meet my wife on the very first day I moved to New York. We didn't get together until way later, but I was this cocky 24-year-old that showed up with a duffel bag. And for extenuating circumstances, I had to pick up keys from this office building from my ex-girlfriend from high school. Like, it was just like this weird, that's a much different story in its own right. But I was like, I'm in the 57th floor of this Manhattan high-rise, like swinging around in this office chair, and in walks this woman, like I'm picking her keys up from her boss. That's now my wife. And that's one of those things, like it happened. And when we got together, it was like, just, we're feeling it out. So it is a little bit by design. Like I moved to New York by design, and I knew I found the people I wanted to work for. Yeah. And I just focused on that. Like I'm going to work for them. Like that's what I want to do. Like do the stuff that I'm really interested in. I'm in 10 bar at night. I'm going to do anything it takes at that time. But that's also the luxury when you're 24, 25, right? Like there are different spaces of life when that happens.
Absolutely.
Then we got married and we had kids and we moved to Colorado, you know, and I know for a fact my wife in the back of her head was like, we'll go back to New York. Like she was a lifer, like grew up there. And I was like, I'm leaving New York. She's like, cool, I'm staying in New York forever. Like, well, this is going to be fun for a while, I guess. Like, you know? So those types of things, I think transitions happen in a way in that I more than anything think it's like paying attention to what your gut tells you than anything else. Okay. I think I've trusted my gut a lot. And it's worked out in the long run, and it's almost invariably because of people. I've like, you guys talk about this a lot. Like I've been so fortunate to have like really incredible mentors and really incredible people who have bled into me and put into my life and taught me things that I've hopefully had the opportunity to pass on to other people, and still in my life can continue to pass on. But it's living like with the ability. I think there's some people, backing up, I think some people who may miss some things that are so focused on one thing. And I've had this happen in my life too, that you miss some of the other pieces, right? Like this is the end goal. And I think that like talking about a second act, like you get to the end and then you're like, shit, like now what? Right?
Yeah.
Like that's a thing. That's a very
100%.
much a thing. So, and again, I talk with my brother about this a bunch. I'll segue like really quick personal note too. Like my dad had to retire early, like earlier than he wanted to. First to go to school in his family, and again, that circumstances outside his own control. He built this entire career and was like, shit, right? And now,
Yeah.
and it destroyed him for a little while, but now he's like the happiest grandpa I've ever seen in my entire life. Like he like prides himself on that, and he's a businessman now. He runs like a bunch of Airbnbs, and he's got a completely different thing. But it took him so much to get to that place because he was so focused incredibly on it.
Yeah.
And he wrapped his entire life up in like, I am this thing, and now what do I do? So I don't know that completely answers your question. I've always felt like I should follow what was the best path for me based on what my gut tells me at the time. And the hardest transition has been this last one. Like, I knew for a fact I had to get out. And how much time am I going to put in? So to me, like, twisting the focus to being there, it felt like it was almost the hardest thing to shift into the next gear. That was the toughest.
Well, I asked that question because I'm guilty of 20 years being focused on essentially one thing. And you get to that end of that timeline and you're like, crap, I've got to go. I'm getting ready to leave this thing, and I've got, what do I have in front of me? So in a way I empathize with your father.
Yep.
And, luckily I wasn't forced out, but it comes very quickly when you don't have plans or you haven't made plans before that time comes. And I'm so envious of young Marines or young people in the military these days who are doing their thing in the military, but they also have a coffee roasting company on the side or real estate, thing going on the side, and their wheels are churning in other ways because they recognize it's not going to last forever.
Yeah. One thing I remember thinking, and I've tried to hold on to this as much as possible. So we were working on an event, and it was still pretty early on. Like, I was still in my 20s, I think. But I remember I had like all of these things. We're building this snowboard jump on the East River in Manhattan. It was the first time like major snowboarding competition had been brought to the city, and we have to blow snow, we have to build scaffolding, we have to do all these things. And I remember I was just so overwhelmed, like just at the breaking point of like, can I handle this? And I had all the maps and everything laid out, and I was trying to figure something out. And I just had this moment of like, would 10 years ago me be proud of me in this moment?
Wow.
And like, that's like, when it gets down, when I start like getting underneath it, or like it's hard, or even like, family stuff is like, am I in this moment? Would 10 years ago me be proud of me now? And if yes, great, let's keep going. If not, why? And what can we do to adjust that? And is it a trajectory? Is it like a focus thing? Is it, how you're living your life? Is it you're out of shape? Like any of those things. Would 10 years ago me be proud of who I am right now? And if I can use that gauge for the rest of my life, it becomes pretty simple.
Sure.
Yeah, the question of who are you is such an interesting one to me, because it can be answered in so many different ways, right? Like, coming back, it can be, are you a financial number? I'm a millionaire. Or it could be your job. I'm a real estate investor. I'm a Marine One pilot. I'm a tech guy. Is it something outside of work? I'm a family man. I'm an athlete. Like, who are you? Like, how do you answer that question? And is there a right answer to that question? And I think it's sort of like a deep reflective exercise. And then it goes into your goal setting about what you want to achieve in life, and how are you defining what those goals are? Yeah. And then also understanding what the expectation should be. And I think in some ways, if you start to just accept the outcome of something, but you put in your best work, any outcome is okay, and that helps reveal who you are and what you're doing in some way, while all the while still having some personal things you want to achieve in life, both professionally and then within your community. So it's just like a fascinating thought experiment that we're talking through here, and I think it's why I'm drawn into these extremes. And what's funny is, while I'm fascinated by people who can go really, really extreme and have that focus, I'm equally fascinated by people who just sort of go with the flow and let life happen to see what happens. And I love, Ben, that you're a gut instinct kind of person. because while John will laugh at this, I do a lot of planning and prep and analyzing stuff. With all the data, I also tend to make gut-based decisions, even if at times they go against the data, because something consciously or subconsciously is telling me that ain't right.
Yep. I rarely have regretted that, right? Like there's multiple. So even in the current space, Eric and I have had this conversation again recently. It was we've lost money. We've lost money in walking away, like getting down the line of due diligence, putting money down, going hard on certain projects. And there's like on paper, it looks good on like this should work, but there's just something about it. Like we went toward one and we got really far down the line. We were really excited about this project to the point where we're already having conversations about raising capital and like kind of lining people up. And we drove onto the property and we looked around and we both looked at each other. We're like something doesn't feel right here, man. Like it's just, we're going to have to bite the bullet and we're going to have to walk away and it's going to be on us. Like this is going to affect our families in this space. But like very rarely have I ever regretted that. Yeah. Because I think it also builds in, like if you could have that conversation, look each other in the eye, or your investors or your employees or your teammates, like whoever it might be, man, there's nothing better than that. Like if you can trust somebody, especially when it's hard, to be like, I believe this. Not like I'm being told this or I've talked myself into this, which is super easy, by the way. We all have done that, I'm sure, as well. But like if you can look somebody in the eye, especially as a leader, and be like, okay, I'm in. You believe it, I believe it. Let's go. Like that's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
With supply chains becoming more complex, you need to stay on top of the latest logistics developments. So if you work with logistics, you need the Beyond the Box podcast from Maersk. It's the easy way to keep up to date with everything from digital disruption in logistics to the need for supply chain resilience in today's market. Find out more and keep ahead of the game with the Beyond the Box podcast on logistics insights at maersk.com/insights.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Ben, I wrote down something when you were talking very early on the show. And I wrote down the power of yes. Because you were talking about the switch from New York back to Colorado, going from the previous, employment that you were in to real estate and working with your brother. And you said something about just going for it and having the mindset that this was going to work. And I wrote down power of yes because it reminds me of so many people that we've had on the show that just say, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And it may not work, but I'm going to try. And that resonated with me in what you are doing, because now you're obviously in commercial real estate, but something within you just said, we're going to do it and it's going to work out. And if not, we're going to learn something, but yes, I'm going to try. Talk to me about that mindset of just switching. I know there's family and I know there's factors involved. You can talk about that as well, but let's talk about just the mindset at first.
Sure. I think, and it's a great question. I don't know that there's any one right answer, right? Like, but I think for us and for me, it lined up to, it's a gut feeling, but putting a lot of faith in the abilities that you've garnered, right? Like the ability, whether you're an employee of a coffee shop or of, Boeing or whatever it might be, like whatever you've garnered in your life to put you in a space. Yeah. There's a lot of, and I'll speak specifically from real estate, right? So there's a lot of talk about like, you can use your skills and you can do this thing. And once you bring everything that you have from finance or bring everything you have and like just throw it into real estate and then and just do that thing. And while that like is somewhat true, I would say that like I experienced something different. Like the project management is different. The people are different. But like once I got past that initial, like it's not one for one, the idea is a lot the same. So I trust in the sense that the power of yes, Eric and I talked a lot about it. I used to talk to my wife about it. But it's about like, do you in your gut feel like this is something that can be better for the next thing? Like if I'm looking down the line 10 years, do I think making this decision, I'm going to be proud of me in 10 years to reverse it, right? And I know staying in that space, I would have been happy, but I know also what the other side of that would have been. It's more to say, this is going to sound so cocky and shitty, but it's like, I knew we were going to be okay. Like, and it's not going to be without trial. It's not going to be without loss. It's not going to be without hardship. But I know that we are going to make this pivot, and I know that the people we've put in the foxhole with us, and the people that aren't even there yet, and some of them are going to leave. But I know that like in the aggregate of this thing that we're doing, if we decide this is where we're going to go, we're going to go. And it's going to take, like you guys talk about this 1%, like it's not me sprinting. It's not me. I'm not going to get there tomorrow. I'm not going to get there even in probably 5 to 7 years, maybe 10, maybe not, depending on a lot of factors. But a lot of it has to do with the fact, like, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to put as many good people around me as possible, right? Yeah. Like that's, to me, more than anything else. You can bring millions of dollars to a project. You can bring unlimited resources to something. But the people are what actually make it happen, right? Like that's at the end of the day, like I can count like people who I want like behind me, and I could call those people up. And I think that was the people like we leaned on when I made this transition, right? Like it's like as soon as I got, not really the blessing, but I was like, hey, I'm going this way. Like, man, right on. If you can put those people around you that you know and you can trust, and I would say the hardest part for a lot of people that I've run into is like I have Eric, right? Or I have John. Like I've texted John like, hey man, what's up? Like, but knowing that like if I had to call him like, yo, it's tough right now, that I could just be real with him.
Yep.
That's the power of yes for me, is like I get to say yes because I believe in the people we have with us. Does that make sense?
It's good.
It does. And we talk a lot about the importance of the community that we build for ourselves or that we decide to become a part of, and how impactful that is at every stage of our life. And the power of yes, if you have a willingness to take risk and say yes, it's fascinating. The journey is fascinating, especially when you're willing to accept any outcome. Like you may have a goal, but if you, like you said, if you're putting yourself around and with people that you trust and that work hard and that are going to help you sort of achieve those things, and you yourself are putting in the effort, like you said, Ben, it will be okay. It's just sort of this magical thing that happens. And if anybody out there can predict what's going to happen in 10 years, please call me, because I've got a few like financial bets I'd love to make and all kinds of stuff. But we do have aspirations. The question I often wonder, though, is once you get to that thing that you want in life, is the goal, or has the goal been more, or are you then content with that thing that you've achieved?
I would say the same thing. Like if there's somebody who gets to a place and they're content, I would love to have a conversation with them too. Like I haven't met anybody that's achieved financial or anything else that's like, I did that thing and now I'm completely done, right? Like I'm going to set everything down and I'm just going to sit in a chair for the rest of my life. I've never met a single person at any level that is content with that has achieved it through success, right? And I think the other thing is, Eric always asks this when he has coaching, and he always asks and like gets really intense with people. It's like, what happens? Like, what if it goes wrong? Like, let's play this worst case scenario, right? And I'm sure you guys have talked about this on the podcast too. But I think the biggest thing that holds people back is, and obviously it's fear, but it's like I don't think it's even necessarily tangible fear. It's like giving up what I already know. It's like this current thing, whether it's good or bad, versus like this intangible what if out there. And I think the biggest thing is walking that all the way down the line, ideally with somebody that knows you and can like vocalize and push and prod a little bit, because it gets gross. Like it's a weird, gross feeling to have somebody like, cool, you're afraid. What are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to work out. Okay, like let's get into that. What does working out not mean? Like you don't make any money?
Right.
Yeah, okay, great. Why didn't you make money? Well, I wasn't very good at it. Okay, and let's walk this even farther down the line. Like what are you doing now, and why are you unhappy with that? And if you're unhappy with it and you can't make money, you have to come back. Could you come back to this job? Like for me, I think I could go back. Like I still produce events. We could jump back into it tomorrow, right? Like there's something for that. There's a lot of people that are that way. Like if you can't and you don't want to do that, what if? Okay, cool. You're in the exact same position as you were like a couple steps ago.
Yeah.
What else are you going to pivot to? And are you willing to give that up? Like, are you willing to give up like that feeling of like, hey, 10 years ago me is proud of me now? Are you willing to give up that space in your life for the continuity of comfortability, right? Like, and that's really the only thing that it really is the lack of uncomfortability.
Yeah.
Like growth sucks sometimes. It blows. Like it's uncomfortable, and it's like the best things that you learn are going to when you fall down and skin your knee and get sand in your eye and like lose money. We have learned more from things that we've broken than the things that we fixed.
Totally.
Right? So, totally. And it's easy to say that. It's easy to say that on the other side. But it's really important to understand that, like, again, that's the power of the people around you, is that there's other people that have skinned their knee and got sand in their face, like doing the same exact thing that you're doing. Like if you're afraid of it, and I hate being a preachy dude, like, hey, go do this thing and it'll all be good. Like that's not what I'm trying to say. Is like, for me, I was having trouble with this transition. I went and talked to somebody who'd walked this road before me. And usually I would do the same things. Like when I was going in like back in action sports, I met those Red Bull guys and we'd sit and we'd talk and we're like, this feels right because I know I want those people in my life. Like this real estate thing, it feels good because I met a lot of people. I was like, you know what? I think there's some people in this space that are my people. Not all of them, for sure. Yeah. But there's a community here that I want to be a part of. Yeah. And I think even walking down the line of like in real estate now, like a hard thing is raising money, right? Like if you want to do a big project, you have to put some people in your world to raise cash. And so we've really been intentional, especially lately, about we don't want 30,000 investors. What I want is building a community of people that I really care about and want in my space. And then they also happen to be our investors, right? They also happen to be these folks. So I think that even goes back to that power of yes, like put people in your world, like in that space. And if it fits, you probably have a pretty good idea of where you want to be. And if you don't, like just being honest with yourself.
Tim Ferriss talks about that in one of his books, and I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan, where he shares about, do you want 1 million, 10 million people in this like phony community, or like 1,000 people who are just follow you to the ends of the world and believe in all the things that you're doing? And at least in my opinion, it's the latter. And it sounds like,
do you want to be on their team? Like that's what I ask all the time. It's like, do I want to answer the phone of this person? Like, do I want to like go skiing and hang out with them? Like, the answer is no.
Right.
It's great.
It's a good gut check.
Yeah, I want people on my team that I want to be on their team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've alluded to it a little bit, Ben, but Wild Oak Capital is your company, your real estate company. Why, there's a lot of talk. I'm only on social media, only on LinkedIn. A lot of people say, oh, commercial real estate's where it's at because you can live the lifestyle that you want and it's passive and blah, all those keywords, right?
You'll get rich tomorrow. It's no big deal.
It's your overnight success.
Yeah. But you've alluded to it a little bit. Why did you choose commercial real estate? And what are you doing in that space, just for our audience?
Yeah. Commercial real estate, and that's a big brush to paint with, right? Like commercial real estate is a very deep, broad space. So what we do specifically is we syndicate real estate, which means we take and pool money in groups of investors and we buy larger assets. So John, Mike, we're going to go buy this asset in Arkansas. It's going to cost $4 million to purchase. We need to raise about $2 million. Here's how it breaks down. You get a piece of that ownership stack, right? Like that's why we love it in this space and specifically what we're doing. And we like it for a couple of reasons. So there is wealth creation possibility there if you do a good job, but it's not overnight. Like I know there's so many people, and you're so right, that there's like all this talk about you can quit your job and quit your 9 to 5. And, I think it's just the newest cycle, especially when money was cheap. It's become there's a lot less of that chatter now that it's a little bit more difficult to close deals.
Yep.
But it's a lot and the reason we like it is because it's very real, right? Like, I think that's the one thing that does get thrown around a lot, but is extremely true, is that we can create tangible change through our specific actions, right? Like, I'm not saying don't invest in stocks. I'm not saying there's not other financial tools that are out there, but even as an investor and even as a heavily vested investor in like bigger companies, I am not at the wheel, right? Like, I don't get that. So for us, we like that. There's some people who like to be passive and say, cool, like a lot of our investors, like, we trust you, we trust where this is going, but they're calling us, and the things that we do and the decisions that we make, we directly work with our investors. And there's a big tangible aspect to that, right? So we chose that, and it's because it's scalable. It's because over time, it has been the most stable asset as far as wealth creation is concerned. But also, we get to do a lot of good for people, right? Like, sure. We feel good about what we're doing in a sense that we can go in, we can take a building that probably has been mismanaged or just underrepresented in some way, pick that up, make a better place for people to live, make a little bit of money for ourselves and our investors, and create just a better world for people to live in. And that's grandiose talk. For like, what we're trying to do is like do a little bit of good while being better and getting better every single day, right? And it's some days it's a win, some days it's a loss. We have really tough conversations on a regular basis. People are people, right? Like, there's highs and lows in every aspect, but we choose it because we think that there's a lot that we can do to help our investors, a lot we can do to help our families, and there is a growth aspect. There's a lot of people, especially like I didn't start paying attention to my future until much later than a lot of other people did, because I was just going one event to the next event. I was living for myself. I was living in New York, like pushing as much as possible. Like you're talking about, John's like very similar, but like there's no pension to events. Like and especially when you were working on your own, like as a W-9 employee or like our own small companies, like you're on your own to make your own future, right? And there's a lot of people out there that didn't stack into a 401k or an IRA or whatever that might be. And I was certainly one of them in the beginning. So there's the ability to work hard and exponentiate compared to a W-2, right? Like a W-2, you go there, they give you a paycheck for X amount of dollars, and then they put some of that away, and your company may or may not match. And that's a slow and steady. And that's awesome for a lot of people, and it compounds over a long period of time.
Yep.
What this allows us to do is we scale, from a $2 million deal to a $4 million deal to a $10 million deal, like over a little bit of time, and how we build those things. And so the way that we make money on that and the way that we build cash is just a faster road. So I think that there is some truth in like that guru thing, like, hey, you can come here and you can make more money. You absolutely can, but it doesn't come without work and doesn't come without putting the time in and knowledge and some risk.
Yep. Yeah. The slow and steady approach works. I mean, it works. I've heard of janitors dying in their 80s that have millions of dollars socked away. But I think there's a disproportionate number of millionaires and billionaires who have made their fortunes in real estate. And it's a really interesting sort of dimension of a financial portfolio. There's less liquidity, but there's a lot more tax benefits and interesting things you can do with leverage and that sort of stuff when it comes to real estate that you can't get in some of those other asset classes.
Very much agree. And I think that's the other thing that we're really excited about is there's a lot of people, for whatever reason, real estate seems to be completely underrepresented in a lot of people's financial portfolios. Everybody always, like I said, there's a huge proportion of people that go work at a W-2 and they open that 401k and there's a company match. And I've had so many conversations with people that don't even necessarily know what they're invested in, right? Like, it made some money. I get the statement. I look at it. It went up. Cool. Next, right? And the ability to talk about how you as an employee may have an opportunity, especially if you have, a 401k and you switch a job and you get another one, you can switch a job, like switching those things and how you become a little bit more self-directed. And I mean, I say that like self-directed IRAs and things like that, but a lot more of like the ability to have a little more control over exactly where the stuff is going. And as we get older, right, like in your 20s, like you're less, I should say typically less worried about that. You get in your 30s, you have family, you start paying attention to that. I would encourage anybody listening to that, like just spend a little bit more time on paying attention, like where things are going. And that's why we love real estate and bringing it back. It's like, it seems that most people don't understand how strong tax benefits can be, even in their own right? Like just that one component of it is really huge. And so when we approach somebody like, yeah, the money that we're making here can offset a lot of your tax burden of this investment, even in its own right. It's not free money, but it's like the government is giving you an incentive to invest in this space. And there's a reason. Like, investing in companies is great, but you're investing in real estate. You're investing in places for people to live. Like, there's a lot of incentive there on purpose. So yeah, we love kind of spreading that gospel a little bit too, and showing people that it's a really powerful tool that can benefit their family and, you know, diversify what they're putting out there.
Nice. For folks who are earlier career, who maybe don't have, or maybe think they don't have enough money to put into real estate investment yet, what do you say to folks like that?
I would say ask somebody that knows a little bit more than you do. And if there's a lot of resources out there. Read some books. I would say saving is not always a bad thing. Like yes, savings accounts for the most part, depending on where we're at inflationary, is like can be a burn, but put it in a place where you're going to make a little bit of money and just set it aside, right? Start there. It doesn't have to be in one place or another. I would, more than anything, implore you, learn a little bit. Read, like, now the internet is a disastrously like dangerous place, but it's also like a benefit in the sense that you can get so much knowledge for free, right? And learn about a couple of different things, because we syndicate multifamily real estate. We take on LP investors, which means they're passive investors. Find somebody that knows something that you can learn from. Like one of our first investments, like we put in all the legwork, and we had a mentor that put in some cash and would like help us along the way, right? Like, I would highly encourage you to go find somebody that is doing something that's interesting to you and ask a bunch of questions, because that's the other thing that I've learned in my life. There have been very, very few times, if any, and I can't think of a single one right now, where I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. Can you help me? And the person said no, right? Like, without fail, everybody's been like, absolutely, man. I can see you got like an interest in this. And it hasn't been like, what value can I bring to you? Like, why do this? Like, probably not a lot, man. Like, you're brand new, like, but you're interested, and I will spend some time with you. Like, just ask. And that goes for me too. Like, email me. I'm sure there's notes. Like, I'll be happy to, like, if I don't know the answer, I'm sure we know some people that do. But ask a bunch of questions, put a little bit of money aside, and pay attention to where that goes. Because you'd be very surprised how much a little bit of money turns into a lot of money later down the line.
Absolutely. An LP investor, for those who aren't familiar, limited partner, you're basically along for the ride. You're trusting the experts, and your risk is limited too as well, right? The upside is unlimited upside potentially, but you do limit your risk to what you put in. And it's, again, another sort of interesting and favorable component of these investment vehicles.
Very much.
Ben, you know, I talk about on the show something called brilliance in the basics, something that you are really good at, that you can rely on, that when all else is failing, that's the foundation that you have to go back to and grow from again if you get knocked down. The market is changing wildly, and people in real estate are saying buy. People out of real estate are saying wait. You know, people speculating on the side are saying, oh my gosh, I don't, what's the market doing tomorrow? A lot of voices coming in and out. You talked about a partner who's really good at underwriting. You talked about your brother who's really good at, some of the things that he's doing. And I'm sure you have, significant strengths in some of those areas. With the market conditions today, where are you guys and your team?
Oh boy.
This is less of a real estate conversation, more of just basic, how do you rely on each other? How are you staying consistent? How are you growing despite the headwinds?
Sure. And I think a lot of that, I would say two things, right? Like real conversations and honest conversations with your team, and having a direction of where we want to go. Like we have some goals that we set as a team, and we revisit those every single year. We have some sort of just KPIs that we're trying to hit, and we reinvent those all the time. We recently brought on another person onto our team. Her name's Bonnie. She's an amazing asset manager. She's got a brain for it, and like fits a space that we're like, oh, you're way better at this than we are. Like, we're so like, we're glad you're here. Like, we didn't even think of that kind of thing. And so we try to grow in the sense that we bring people that are better than us at the things that we need, but we have very honest conversations with each other. And yeah, that's the market is all over the place. And I thought you were going to what's your next move? Like, anybody, I think there's a lot of very, very smart people that we pay attention to, right? Like, Terrence well. Like, I consider Terrence to be like one of the smartest guys I know in this space. Like, he sees things in the wind that other people don't. Like, it just is that way. But I think the one thing that we can do is be prepared. And the one thing that we can do is, especially in a space that we rely on people, we have investors and things like that. So we're prepared with brokers. We're prepared with asset managers, and we're very much prepared with our people. We try to have as many consistent conversations as we can. And in that space with our current owned assets, we're as honest with our people as we possibly can too. Like, we over communicate. We communicate once a month. There's a lot of people who communicate quarterly or like even every half a year. We send an update every single month.
Love it.
And that's how, for us at least, we stay in a space where, hey, this isn't going great. Like, we've had a tough couple of months because of this. And so on a quarterly basis, you go quarter over quarter. And last quarter was awesome, and this quarter completely shit the bed. Like, there's a big space there, right? Yeah. So for us to be able to have that conversation and be honest with each other internally, create a message that's honest and put that out there, that's something we rely on quite a bit as well. You talk about like going back to the things that you're good at. Like, I think we've built a team that has overlapping strengths, to your point. Like, I know I'm good in a crisis. I know I'm good if, like, my back's to the wall, like, we've got to figure something out. If a freaking hurricane hits our job site and we have to rebuild everything, which happened, like, we can do it. But it's because of the people we put around us. Like, I'm not doing that on my own.
Yeah.
Like, we have like,
absolutely
the people that we put, and like, we were prepared. Like, we're prepared.
I love it.
I love it.
That's
too.
really good.
And it sort of helps us bring the podcast closer to a close, Ben, because one of the last questions we like to wrap up with is you're talking about hiring the best people, having this community, leaning on each other's strengths. But the podcast is about the second act and people who are just, in some cases, starting out in their second act, who may not have a team, who may not have found their community yet, who may not have some of these elements that that you've spent time building and now leveraging to the things that you do in life. So what do you tell those folks as parting advice for this podcast who are just getting started or just contemplating getting started in their second act?
You're not alone. This is by no means the first time this road has been walked. This is by no means the hardest thing probably that you've done. It just feels like it probably right now, but I'm sure there's a lot of things that you've faced in your life that you're not necessarily counting right now. But even if you think you don't have a community yet, you do. And even if you feel like it's completely minuscule, I'll be very willing to bet that even if there's people that you don't necessarily consider a friend or anything else, like a John or me or Mike or anybody else, like there's people and there are resources there that you probably haven't counted on yet. And don't be afraid to ask them, right? Like, the hardest part of this journey for me, and I can't speak for everybody, the hardest part for the journey was finally looking myself in the face, like, dude, like, put it away. It's fine. Like, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's not like you don't owe anything to anybody else but yourself and your family. Like, that, having that realization, for whatever reason this is a second act for you, if it's a choice, if it's a forced choice, if it's a matter of circumstance, you don't owe anything to anybody else except for you and your family, and move on with that. And put the people around you that you want to be around. Like, that will come with you walking one step at a time, 1% better every single time that you get an opportunity to. It's not going to be, doesn't have to be massive change, but just like the intentionality of like, I'm going to move ahead today in this way. You'll get there, and you're by no means alone.
Love it. That's awesome.
Well, Ben, you have been a great guest.
Thanks, man.
So much
Amazing
wisdom.
guest.
I wish we, one of the things we talked about in our meeting, Michael and I's meeting a couple weeks ago, was how do we change up our podcast a little bit? Do we extend out the version? Do we make it a 2-hour podcast? Do we go Joe Rogan style and just keep talking until we can't? This is one of those episodes where I could keep talking to you until 3:00 this afternoon.
Yeah.
But we haven't decided on that yet, and this is the format we're sticking to.
And we want to be I don't think we set the expectation with Ben that this could go on the rest of the day.
All good.
So,
but thank you so much for sharing your story and the uphill battles that you have faced and some of the wins that you have achieved, and sharing those with our audience. And for anybody that's interested, who can't move out to Colorado and be with you on a day-to-day basis, how can they get in touch with you? And what's the best website or best email for them to reach out?
Yeah. We're active on social. I have you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram, Ben Nelson 303. Wild Oak Capital, you can reach out to us there. And there's a lot of information there. And we have resources, again, if it's a real estate thing, like dig in. There's a bunch of stuff that we've written, and if there's something we haven't that you'd like to see, let us know. Otherwise, just, we're here to support each other more than anything else and support you. So if we can help you, we certainly will.
And talk for 2 minutes real quick about your Scale conference, because I've attended the Scale conference. I've walked away with many friends, many influences in my life, and want to do that. And you've got another one coming up this year, so real quick plug for that.
It's in October. Thanks. Yeah, we've all been to conferences, right, in any industry, and a lot of them are just like hundreds of rows of chairs in a ballroom, like staring at somebody who apparently knows more than you do, like probably. So we produce a conference, and Eric and I, and through some of our mentors, we help produce someone that's like kind of similar. But we really wanted to make one on our own. So it's called Scale, and really it's limited to 70 people total. And the reason we do that is because it's not rows of chairs. Like, you're in a room, you're at a table with other people there, and we have a minimal amount of like talk at you content, and hopefully a maximum amount of you are a part of a conversation content.
Nice.
Small breakouts. We try to bring a lot of really talented people who have actually achieved things in this space. They're not just like selling you a program. There's no sales. There's no one-upsmanship. There's no sponsor tables. It's literally about you getting as good as you possibly can from what you bring to the table, and us helping you as much as we possibly can over the course of 3 days. It's in Denver, Colorado, so center of the country. Come visit us in Colorado. And it's 10th through the 12th of October. So you can find that at scalemfevent.com. And all the details there. We're running a special on registration for the next month. It's June 4th now, so July 4th. I'm not sure when this comes out. But there's a kind of a breakdown, or you can email us and we'll get you a code for discount as being a part of a member of this podcast. Happy to extend that to all your listeners as well. But yeah, if you're in the space, it'll sell out. We had a pretty successful first go at it last year. John was there, and we're super thankful. But we had a lot of positive interactions, and we're just excited to help. And I think that's more than anything what we can do.
Yeah, and I can testify that Terrence Doyle spoke, phenomenal conversation. Johnny Catani, another guy that I got to meet face to face after knowing him for a little bit, and now I run into him in the Salt Lake City airport.
Yeah.
Great person, great individuals. The quality of people that are there, and the way every person seems to care about the growth of the other individuals is something I have never experienced. So I can attest to the conference. Great opportunity. So
thanks, guys.
Well, Ben, thank you so much again for coming on, and what a blessing you've been to me in my life, but hopefully to our audience. And so
it's very mutual, my friend. And it's great to meet you, Michael.
Yeah, likewise, Ben. It's been awesome getting to know you on this podcast, and hopefully our paths cross in person soon.
Let's count on it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, let's make it happen. Love it.
All right. Michael, that's a wrap.
Yeah, this was awesome.
So we'll look forward to seeing everybody again next week. Hit us up if you can with any of your content ideas. Like and subscribe wherever you can, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
See ya.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballenger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.